Uh-oh, looks like we got a kitchen gremlin here. A lot of people have been asking me about my fursuit knife and how I made it. So I decided to create this video to help you make your own. I got most of my supplies from the craft store before I realized that Amazon had some cheaper options. I've left some Amazon links in the description below. If you use my link, it's a great way to support my channel without having to donate anything. Plus, you get a cheaper option than what you would at the craft store. Alright, let's make that knife. So first we're going to start with a list of materials that you're going to need to build your knife. Most of these items are household materials that you probably already have, and if you don't, it's good to have them around for future projects. So the very first material that you're going to need is high density EVA foam. This is what the structure of the knife is made out of and is what makes it so sturdy. I used a 10mm thickness and found it for about $25 at the craft store. Next, you're going to need some chalk. This will help you paint an outline on the EVA foam without leaving permanent marks. And in order to make your outline, you're going to need a tape measure to measure out the size of the knife. You're going to need some scissors to cut out your knife shape. And you're going to need some hot glue in order to glue your fabric on. Next, we're going to talk about the fabric materials that you will need for this project. You will need a square of felt for detail work later, some shiny fabric for the blade of the knife, and some fleece for the handle. Probably only need half a yard of each of these materials for this project, but more is always better in case of mistakes. Now, you're going to want to put a work mat down so that you don't damage any of the surfaces that you're working on top of. Protect the surface from hot glue drips or cuts that you make while you are working. Next item that you're going to need is paper. You're going to make your knife pattern out of this paper before we cut into the EVA foam. This way we save as much material as possible. The knife pattern will probably be longer than one sheet of paper, so in order to compensate for this, we tape two pieces of paper together. Taping the pattern long way across allows more tape to cover more surface area of the paper. So my plan to teach you how to do this was to reverse engineer one of my knife patterns that I already have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this knife pattern and I'm going to trace it onto these two connected sheets of paper. And then I'm going to measure out each side and give you the exact measurements so that you can have a knife that looks like mine. Here we have the measurements of my knife pattern. My recommendation here is that you take a screenshot of these numbers and use your phone to zoom in on the numbers. And of course, the next step is to cut out our pattern so that we can trace it onto our EVA foam. So our next step here is to get out our EVA foam and put our pattern on top of it so that we can trace and cut it out. I like to utilize my EVA foam to the fullest, and I'll try to shove my patterns into the nooks and crannies of it in order to get the most out of my foam. I decided to cut a chunk out of my EVA foam to make the shaping of the knife easier on myself. The next step after this is to trace the knife pattern onto the EVA foam with the chalk. I think I didn't press record when I was doing this part, so enjoy this magically completed knife pattern. Obviously, the next step is to cut it out. I used an X-Acto knife because it is a tool that I'm comfortable with. I recommend crafting scissors to folks who are not as confident with sharp blades. Please don't hurt yourself. Because of the thickness of the foam, a blade may not cut all the way through the first time, so just trace your cut again and that should work for you. Now we have our knife shape, looking good. Stabby, stabby. And now it is time to glue our fabric onto our knife to finish it up. So go ahead and plug your hot glue gun in. Next, lay out your shiny fabric, backside facing up so that you can trace your pattern onto the back of it. You want to make sure that you have enough fabric along the sides of the knife in order to glue onto the ridges. Now trace your pattern onto the back with your chalk. This is what it would have looked like if I was tracing on the EVA foam. And here we have our finished pattern. In a moment, you'll see a stray floater across the screen. Our house angel wanted its 15 seconds of fame. Here I'm marking the extra length of fabric that I want to cut for the knife. As you can see, there are still floaters around me here. Is it fluff or are they spirits? You decide. Leave a comment. Now is the part where we make the other side of the shiny knife by flipping the pattern of the EVA to its other side and making a second cut of knife shiny fabric. And now it's time to cut the fabric for the blade out. And this is what it should look like when you're done. And now we use the fleece for the handle. So the way I figured out how much fleece I would need for my handle was by just rolling it up in the fleece and kind of measuring it from that angle. So if you've made a custom handle for yourself, that's what I would recommend for you to do. All you need to do is roll it over so the fleece covers both sides just one time, and then you can cut that fabric out. You're always more than welcome to leave more fabric, especially on the bottom, so you have enough fabric to fold in on itself and make your knife look complete. Now that we've got all of our fabric cut out, it's time to do the hard part, the gluing. Now the trick to making a nice looking knife is by gluing only on the edges and making sure all the fabric lays down as flat as possible. Now for gluing, a general rule of thumb is setting your glue gun to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. My glue gun does not have temperature control, but you can tell the glue is ready to go when you see small wisps of smoke coming off the melted glue. I recently upgraded from a mini glue gun to this nice little glue gun in front of me here. It worked really well for this project and I'm excited to use it in the future. Link in the description below. To reiterate, we will only be gluing along the sides of the actual blade itself. That's where we will tack the fabric down. This will ensure that the blade looks flat. It's always wise to do a little dab test of glue on the back of a scrap of your fabric. This way, when it dries, you can check out the front of the fabric and see what the glue looks like when it attaches to the back. Now that we're all ready to glue, let's set our knife on top of the fabric and start gluing down the ridges. You can watch me while I do it here and pause and rewind wherever you need it. What I'm doing is patting down the fabric on top of the hot glue to get it to stick. If you decide to do this, please be careful. Now it's time to flip it over and start gluing the other sides of the fabric onto the knife. I am about to make a crucial error here and start gluing the fabric from the bottom of the blade as opposed to gluing it from the tip downwards. Gluing it from the bottom upwards made the fabric bunch up when it got to the tip. However, this would be a good opportunity to go over a good gluing technique. So you definitely want to place the glue on before you lay your fabric down. When you lay it down, you want to stretch it across the ridge as much as you can without pulling the fabric too much where the lines can be seen. And if you're comfortable with the technique, you can gently pat the fabric down on top of the hot glue. Now we're about to see where my crucial error took place. As you can see, I'm pulling the fabric taut over the ridge in order to straighten out the fabric to make it look nice. However, there is a big wrinkle of fabric in the corner right there. Mistakes happen, nature doesn't have a perfect mixing bowl, and luckily I have a technique that helped me fix it. Now you want to be very careful when you do this, but you take the hot tip of the glue gun and you go over the dried glue on your project and it should melt the glue again. And this is when you can peel off the fabric to move it around. This was definitely a game changer of a technique once I learned it. Now it's time to cut the excess fabric off the ridge of the knife. Here's a close-up of how close your cut should be. Mine's a little jagged, and that's just because I'm trying to show the camera. Now I'm going to show you how to glue the ridge of the knife on the bottom here. You just want to fold it over like that and give it a snip right in the corner. And give it some hot glue and fold it over. I recommend leaving this tail on and just gluing it down. Time for the other side. So I did learn from my mistake here and I decided to start gluing from the point downwards. This is what you actually want your tip to look like. It will make the final snip of excess fabric much cleaner. Time to glue down the rest of the ridge, right on top over the other shiny fabric. Don't worry, shouldn't bother a thing, especially if you did your glue test before. Now it's time to pull taut from the top of the point down all the way to the bottom of the blade. A good technique to use is to pull the fabric over the ridge and hold it flat against the back of the knife while the glue dries. And just use this technique all the way to the bottom of the blade. Remove any excess fabric and make it look nice. So I made a boo-boo and I cut the flap off that piece of the silver fabric. I recommend keeping that and just gluing it down and then gluing the handle over. However, this is how to glue the last flap on over the side. And we're just going to do the same thing that we did on the other side and just fold the fabric over and give it a snip and then cut the excess off. Now fold it back onto the glue. There you go. And now we've come to the part where we make the handle. In order to make the top of the handle nice and flat, what we do is we're going to take the top of our square of fleece and we're going to fold just one side over. I folded a little too much over. I would put the glue a little bit higher next time because when you put too much of a fold in it, it takes away from the bottom, and I almost couldn't cover the bottom of my handle. So for this, I would recommend just moving it up a tiny bit more. Yeah, you want to be very careful when you fold it over because it is very hot. I used my scissors there to move it. Now we fold the fleece over the handle. It's best to start with the curvy part. Once glued, cut the excess fleece. Before gluing down the rest of the fleece, it is a good idea to glue the shiny fabric lower on the handle so the fleece can cover it and make it look complete. You'll see what I mean in this next clip. Should've, could've, would've. Now it's time to tack the rest of the handle down on the fleece. Just use a tiny bit of hot glue on the top here, less than I have right now, and just fold it on over. Yeah, definitely a bit too much glue on this one. But that's okay. Nothing in life is perfect, and it's important to accept these things about ourselves. It's just a toy, and it's going to be functional no matter what. And now we glue the rest on to the edge and cut the excess fabric off. Getting close to the end here. Now we just gotta squeeze that fleece on over the edge of this knife, unless you want to leave it full tang. You know what I mean. If you were wiser than I was and decided to leave some extra fabric at the bottom, just take one edge, glue, and fold it over, cutting off any excess fabric on the bottom. Nice job! And here we have our knife. I'm sure yours looks much better than mine, but you know what? Mine's pretty darn good too. It's a bit scrunkly, it's a bit wrinkly, but it'll do the job. If your EVA foam was twisted in a weird way, don't worry, just give it a twist in the opposite direction and it'll straighten it right out. The final part of our knife will be these decorative handle pins. So now we're going to take our felt and we're just going to use a bottle cap and our chalk to trace a round circle for our handle pin. Make 4 of these, 2 for each side. And bada bing bada boom, just glue them down on your handle in the most aesthetically pleasing way. And when you glue the other 2 on the opposite side, just make sure that they match and line up. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And now you can keep them black if you want to, or you can accent them with some shiny fabric. If you want a knife that was exactly like mine, I did 2 pins on each side. And there we have it, our finished fursuit knife. I hope you enjoyed this how-to tutorial. More fursuit props to come into the future. And I thank you for staying tuned.